Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are on page 1330. Aleph Shin Lamed. And we're speaking about the two dimensions or the two aspects or elements within the Reshimu. The Reshimu is that invisible trace and force that remains after the Tzimtzum, but essentially it's I don't say a reminder, but it's like a fossil from pre-Tzimtzum reality, because a Reshimu means a trace impression from that which was before the Tzimtzum. So though the Tzimtzum concealed the divine consciousness and the revelation that was all encompassing and all uniting and seamless, yet in this so-called empty space and void is a Reshimu, and it has two aspects to it. One, he said, Etzem Nekuda Reshimu, the very Nekuda, this point that he talked about in the previous section, and we learned the Rebbe's footnote about it in Ranat, in a Cholzur Ranat, that point is like a concentrated point that encompasses in it all the potential that will come from it. That's the very letters of the Reshimu, like a clay kibble, like the first container, or a receptacle. And that is the koyach hagvul of Ein Sof. That's the finite power, the God's finite power, which is pre-Tzimtzum, but it wasn't revealed yet. And even though after the Tzimtzum it's not revealed yet in the Reshimu, but now it's been isolated. And that's from that comes from the Helam Ha'atzmi of Ein Sof. And the second aspect of the Reshimu is the Ein Sof that's encompassed in the Nekudas Reshimu, and that's the Atzmus Ha'er K'meishu Kedem HaTzimtzum. So you have in the Reshimu both from the core of concealment, which is the very letters, the very concealed state, and you also have the Oyer, the Atzmus Ha'er that's there, also hidden, but it's a level of Oyer. Like I explained yesterday, that the letters, even simple letters, on one hand, letters are confining, limiting forces, but the letters have potential. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, even before you actually formulate words, has the potential for Oyer that it will convey. So if you take the letter Beis and a Resh and a Vav and a Chaf and you put them together, they'll give you the word Baruch, blessed. But when you look at a Beis, Resh, Vav, Chaf on their own, they're do not express that meaning yet. So the letters have the very substance of the letters, what she calls the koyach hagvul, and it also has the atzmus ha'er. And this is all taken from what we learned earlier on page 1269. If you look there are more details on this matter. Now, obviously, that doesn't have to repeat all the details because he's referring us back there. He's only repeating enough for us to understand what he's going to explain here, the two levels in Avir. Remember, we said the Avir Kadmon is the Reshimu, and it has Avir She'ein Nitfus, and then Avir Yud, the Avir HaNitfus. Like we discussed before, there's a level that's completely not graspable, and there's a level that has something you can grasp upon. So clearly, he's identifying that with these two aspects of the Reshimu. But we haven't finished yet. This is just establishing that there's these two dimensions. So we're right now up to the fourth line in the paragraph on page 1330. I'm going to continue reading now inside. I'm just looking back at Aleph Resh Samach Tes. Yeah. It's basically Etzem Nekudas Reshimu Ve'ere Ein Sof Shabbat. Yeah. So you see here, as I explained, how light and darkness ultimately interact with each other. So it's not just exclusively dark or exclusively light. Within the darkness, there is also, like he says, the potential, or shenichlo, the Ein Sof shenichlo. So he's going to explain now like this. In his boyer, these pages, if you want to follow the text, can be found at ayinbeis.com. So I'm reading, the line begins, Bechinas Atzmus Ha'er, page 1330, the fourth line in the second paragraph. In his boyer, and he's referring back to page 1269. And it was explained there The ba'ir yesh b'chinas etzem v'spashtus. Now he's going to dissect Ohr itself. Remember, Ohr is Gilui, is revelation. But Ohr itself goes through stages. It's not just either it's revealed or not revealed. Like we discussed a number of times of the very faculties, let's say, of a person. I'm just using an example to explain what he's going to say here. So you have the etzem hakoiches, you have the hispashtus hakoiches. Hispashtus hakoiches we all identify with means the expression, spastus, or extension of your faculties. Let's say, you have the power to speak. Even if you're not speaking, you have a power to speak. So there's the etzem koyach hadibur, the essential faculty to speak. And then there's this spastus when it's actually expressing itself. So the same thing with Ohr. There's etzem Ohr, the very concept and the very capacity to shine and reveal. And there's this spastus there when it actually extends itself. So he says, etzem v'spashtus v'hainu, and this means the ba'ir hameir, that in the Ohr that radiates, that illuminates, that shines, the b'cholus u'b'chinas gili ha'er b'atzmusei. In general, this is the gili. He's talking about the Ohr before the tzimtzum. So in general, it's the gili ha'er within the core. It means it's within the so-called Godhead of the divine consciousness before the tzimtzum. This is already a state of gili because there's a state, as we know, Hela Ma'atzmi, where God is not revealed altogether. But here we're talking about Tzmusei, the capacity. The general Gilead, the revelation of light, which is essentially the expression of Elikus. Elikus is being expressed. God does not need to express himself, but he wanted to create expression because to create a world like ours and turn it into a home for the divine, that's called expression. So if everybody was just silent and we would never express ourselves, we wouldn't have relationships, we wouldn't have interaction, we need Ohr and Gili to reveal the godliness within existence, and that starts in the highest levels of the concept that there's Ohr. So he says, Yesh b'zeh Ohr hameir la'atzmei, v'Ohr hashayich el azulas. So now he's breaking it even further down. Well, it's not really further, he's explaining what he just said, but let me explain. Even within, I spoke before about speech. Speech is when I'm speaking to you, that means I'm relating to you and I'm communicating to you. But there's also, and then there's machshava, there's thought. That's when I'm communicating with myself. But in thought itself, you also could have two stages. You could have the thoughts I have that are only directed toward myself and my own thoughts. But my thoughts, I could also think about you. I could think about another. I could think about what I'm going to say to another. But that's still in the Ohr hameir, like he says, Ohr Gili, Ohr b'atzmusei, also have two levels. Ohr hameir la'atzmei, the light that radiates la'atzmei to yourself, but Ohr hashayich el azulas, and the Ohr that you're designating for another. You haven't yet even conveyed it. It's like when we said about that God's shir atzmei b'koyach, that before the tzimtzum, what we talked, Malchus of Ein Sof, the 10 hidden spheres, and he talks about the Gol of Galifu b'tirei law, that in the infinite possibilities, the artist is envisioning one possibility of art, but it's all within himself. But within himself, he's already envisioning something that is going to relate to another. And then there's the tzimtzum, and then there's the actual creation of it. So in other words, it's like within the Ohr itself, there's the Ohr the Ohr reflects to yourself and about yourself, and that can be infinite possibilities. And then there's the Ohr hashayich el azulas, that you're already relating to, and within yourself, you're already associating with, and at least envisioning and relating to Azulas, the other. So it's not a real Keli. Keli is the other. Zulas would be a Keli, but the Keli is already being formed in your own mind. It's like conceptual container, like we discussed. That you're conceptually, the Koyach HaGvul essentially is that God is his power to finite. He's already considering and allocating the resources needed to create a finite world. It's not yet a creation, but within the Ohr, there's that element. The truth is, I shouldn't use Koyach HaGvul because Koyach HaGvul was the first aspect of the Reshimu. So strike that. I think we're talking here is about the Ohr that relates to the other, not the very actual other of the Koyach HaGvul. But let's see how he explains it. Maybe I have to correct myself again. We'll see. But right now, let's just stick. He's spoken about Oyer. In Oyer, two aspects of Oyer. They're both Gili. One is a Gili la'atzmei, like he says. Hameir la'atzmei, v'Oyer hashayach lazulas. They're both not Helam. Helam ha'atzmei is not Oyer hashayach la'atzmei. That's not Hameir la'atzmei. Then you don't say Meir. There's no radiating altogether. It's not like your thoughts that you're thinking to yourself about your own ideas. There's no thoughts altogether. There's no consciousness and there's no expression, because that's not Oyer. In Oyer, there's two levels of expression to yourself and relating to another. Like the Er Seichel Mashpia, the light, the consciousness and awareness of the mind of the Mashpia, of the transmitter, of the teacher, as he's standing on his own. And then there's a second part. So this is like the mind of the teacher as he's thinking ideas on his own. He's not yet thinking about a student or about a makabel, a recipient. And then there's a second element, second dimension. The second part is how the mashpia, or the teacher, is including in himself the air that he's allocating and relating to another. So the same person can be doing two things. One is when he's thinking ideas and he's not relating it to anyone else. He's not thinking about how he's going to communicate it, how he's going to teach it. He's not even thinking about another. And then there's how that mashpia within himself, the oyer, the shaykh, is relating to mekablim recipients. Now he goes back to the Reshimu. Ubenekudas Reshimu, and this Nekudas Reshimu, again, he's referring to it as a Nekuda, as the Rebbe explained, the Nekuda of the hay. It's a point, that's a concentrated point. Like we learned before, that, and like he says, Nekudas Amtsois Ein Sof, which encompasses everything that will come in this seed. So it says in this Nekudas Reshimu, Nichol Beis HaMadreges. Both these levels are encompassed in the Reshimu. Now, I'm not sure whether he's saying the same two that he said before. To me, it sounds like he's saying now that in addition to what the Reshimu has, the Koyach HaGvul, which is Helam HaAtzmi, comes from the Helam HaAtzmi, also includes Oyer, and in Oyer, it includes both aspects of this Oyer. I think that's what he's saying. I'm almost sure that's what he means, but I would rather reserve my final explanation on this to continue reading, seeing where he's going to go with this. I'm just looking back there on page 1269. I think he said, just looking 1 second. Yeah, it's correct what I just said. In the Oyer itself, he has both, the Reshimu has, the first thing is the Koyach HaGvul, which is concealed state, and now he's talking about in the Oyer, it includes both elements of the, so that it basically is giving us, I mentioned before, a fossil. I know it's a little, but it's giving us it's like what's the word I want to use? Not a reminder, but a leftover of everything that was happening before the Tzimtzum. And now he broke it into three things. The Helam HaAtzmi we talked about, the two levels in Oyer itself. That's what he's saying now. When the Kiddush Hashem and Nichol Beis HaMadreges, both levels, because in both of them, there was a Tzimtzum. In other words, if the Tzimtzum didn't happen in both these levels, then you could say some levels altogether were not affected by the Tzimtzum. But since both these levels, both the level of the Oyer to himself and the Oyer as it relates to another were affected by the Tzimtzum, so both of them therefore are carried over into the Reshimu that remains after the Tzimtzum. V'hainu, and this means the Kol Eir HaKav, Hameir Be'elamis, that the entire Eir HaKav, the energy of the Kav that comes after the Tzimtzum and the Reshimu, that radiates in the world, Mereish Kol Dargin at Seif Kol Dargin, from the top levels to the bottom levels, from the highest levels to the lowest levels, Nimtza Kol B'Reshimu, are all encompassed in the Reshimu. And obviously in a koyach hayul, in a potential state, like a seed, but it's all encompassed in there. So what he's adding now is that through the Reshimu, it comes in a koyach gvuli. Let me explain what that means. In a finite power. I want to go back to the example of the artist. So you have an artist who has the capacity, well, as we've spoken a number of times, he's even beyond being an artist. But he's already defined himself as an artist. But he has what we call spheres Ein. He can create infinite types of art. This is all in a very infinite way. This is like before the Tzimtzum, the Ohr, as it radiates to himself, infinite possibilities. Well, then he decides, I'm going to create one piece of art. It's going to encompass it's going to include a horizon, a sky, birds, water, trees, whatever. In the language Lamaila, it's the spheres. This image, this finite piece of art is called the 10 spheres. Chochmah, Bina, Das, and they're going to shape everything in existence. So this is now in the Ohr itself, an Ohr that is already relating to a particular defined state. But it's not yet defined yet. It's all within the consciousness of the artist. But then, in this case, remember, he wants to actually create real art. He doesn't just want to envision it, and he doesn't want it to be theoretical. So there's a koyach hagvul. A koyach hagvul means a real finite power that's going to create a true limited structure, the structure of existence. So you really have three things going on before the Tzimtzum. The Ohr HaBli, the infinite possibilities. The Ohr HaGvul, which is the energy, the message, the Ohr of that's with the message within these letters, or the spheres. And then there's the actual letters themselves, the very defined letters, which are not yet defined, but the power to define them. So the Reshimu, now the Tzimtzum comes, the Tzimtzum conceals all the infinite possibilities. It also conceals some of the intensity of the finite possibility, the finite Ohr, because it's still under the impression, and it's all before Tzimtzum energy, even though it's allocated within the teacher, but the teacher needs a Tzimtzum to be able to actually teach it to the student. And then you need the actual letters to emerge. So the Reshimu now is a Nekuda that has the power of Gvul. In that power of Gvul, power, it's not yet expressed till the Kav comes. So it has in it everything. It has in it the very letters. It has in it the Ohr HaGvul, or what he called here the Ohr HaShayach L'Elamis, and has also the Ohr HaBli Gvul, or what he called the Ohr Me'el La'atzmei. And it's all in this concentrated Nekuda called the Reshimu. That's how I understand what he's saying here. And then he adds one more thing. V'gam kolel ba, a fourth thing. One second. No, it's not a fourth thing. He's going back to the third, to the higher level of Ohr. Sorry. V'gam kolel ba. So everything the Ohr. Now, let me backtrack a second. Then after the Reshimu comes the Kav. The Kav is affected by the Tzimtzum and the Reshimu, even though the Kav is also carrying the Ohr. And this Kav will now actually be the paintbrush that the artist uses, but now he has something to work with. He's working with the kernel, the Nekuda of the Reshimu, which has in it both the Ohr HaShayach that relates to the actual piece of art he's going to create, and it also has, that's the Kav, and it also has within it the Reshimu, the core energy that has no relationship with the worlds. Now, I was first thinking that maybe he means a higher level of Ohr that's even higher than the Etzema Ohr that he said before. That's Meir La'atzmei. And it's possible that it does mean that. Because earlier on page 1269, he actually defined 3 levels. There's Etzema Ohr, there's the Ohr Shaykh La'atzmei, and the Ohr Shaykh La'ilmus. So I'm not sure whether he's referring to all 3 or he's just referring to 2. But regardless, the Reshimu does encompass all of them. So Etzema Ohr She'ena Shaykh La'ilmus. Okay. So you see here, the Reshimu has come alive. As quiet and silent and concealed as it is, it has within it, brimming, all these different levels within it. I'll stop here just if anybody wants clarity before I read on. But he's still going to explain this further.
The Helam Ha'atzmi, the level before the Ohr She'eino Shayach L'Gilui, there is something in between.
Between Helam Ha'atzmi and Etzema Ohr?
Yeah.
Not that I know of. I mean,
but this is the Ohr is Gilui, and Helam Ha'atzmi is not Gilui.
Correct. So it's 2 different levels. And then, I mean, the only thing you could say after the Helam Ha'atzmi comes Helam. That's not Atzmi, but he did say that earlier as well. But it's 2 different kavim. The kav of Helam and the kav of Gili are 2 different tracks. So you're asking me if there's something in between the Helam Ha'atzmi and the Etzema Ohr? The only thing I would say is Helam Ohr, but not Helam Ohr. Helam Ha'atzmi that then becomes Helam. But that, I mean, for all practical purposes, then why does there have to be something in between?
Is the Helam Ha'atzmi? I know it's 2 different tracks, but בסך הכל it's a source or it's in a smoking for oil, no?
Who says? You don't have to say that. You can say Helam Ha'atzmi is God's power, fundamental power to conceal. Or more than that, not just power to conceal. It's a fundamental state of concealment. That is l'mayla mikol gili, period. How they interact, we'll discuss. Ultimately, they all come from one Eibishter, one God. So there's going to be interaction between the Helam Ha'atzmi and the Ohr. But for all practical purposes, remember the Helam Ha'atzmi is the root of Gvura, and the Ohr is the root of Chesed. So we're talking about now the very concept of Helam in this world, Cheshech and Gvura and everything we've been learning about. That's really what the structure of that is talking here. It's like the Etzem Talim, the Asius. So before we haven't yet discussed the interaction between the Helam Ha'atzmi and the Ohr. I mean, I did speak about it a bit today, yesterday, a few days, how they interact, because it's like the Neshama and Guf. They ultimately interact with each other, but they come from 2 different sources. So the Koyach HaTzimtzum comes from a different place than the Koyach HaGili of Ohr. That's the point. Kav and Reshimu come from different places. That's the real key here. Okay?
The tries to say that the Helam Ha'atzmi is the deepest expression of the Atzmos.
I told you, go back to page 12671, and he uses the right words to exactly express this. I don't know what means the deepest expression of Atzmos is a very big word. But if you look at page 1271, he speaks like this. He says, and he says that one expresses more the power of Atzmos that's beyond structure. And one reflects more of the Giluyim of Atzmos. So, yeah, one has a higher element, but they both are necessary. And yes, in some ways, silence, as we spoke about, reveals more power or more strength from the source than does revelation, right? At the end of the day, Ohr only reveals the tziyur, the defined elements, so to speak. I say defined is not the right word. It expresses the expression of Atzmus, not that of Atzmus which is beyond expression. That's the key difference between them, as he explains back there. Okay? In the context that we spoke about, remember, we're talking about real darkness. When there's real darkness, that's not revealing godliness. It's the opposite of revealing godliness. And that's rooted in the Helam Ha'atzmi, when a person hits rock bottom or is in a situation of real distress, the cry of the animal soul. So remember, that's all that reflections of that level of Helam Ha'atzmi. Okay? Yeah. Questions anybody wants to ask? We'll continue, and it was explained above. The etzem ha'er shal ze'emer hu shmoi. That the etzem ha'er is when we say hoyahu shmoi belvad, him and his name. What is a shmoi? Is etzem ha'er? He says, okay, he's saying explicitly what I said. So I stand corrected. He is talking about another level. In Oyer itself, he's talking about the Oyer that relates to Lazulas, other, Oyer that relates to yourself, and then there's Etzem Oyer, which is, he says, it's a level of Oyer that's even higher than the Oyer that speaks to you. But it's still Oyer. It's Etzem Oyer, but it's even higher than, let's say, like thought, where the person's thinking, the teacher, the mashpia is thinking to himself, not relating to another. So there's Oyer relating to another, there's Oyer relating to yourself, and then there's a lie even higher than Kamashul Atzme. The Zehu Oyer, Kamashul Maylam B'chinas Gilui Gam La'atzme. This is a level of Oyer that's even higher than revelation to yourself. In other words, you're not even aware and conscious of it. The second level you're aware of, but it's relating to yourself, not to another, not to a student, not to existence. This is higher than consciousness, but it's still not. Let me see. I would say that this is not the Helam Ha'atzmi. This is in Oyer, a level that is not yet manifest in any form of consciousness, but he's still calling it Oyer. I'm almost sure that's what he means. And again, if what we learn afterwards it comes out otherwise, I'll correct myself. But I would go right now with the premise that he's talking about Etzema Oyer, which is now level. That's for who, and he explains what this level is like. Who kamoy koyach hayuli ha'atzmi shekol be'etzema nefesh. This is like the koyach hayuli ha'atzmi that's encompassed in the etzema nefesh. So we've talked about faculties. So let's talk about, let's say, the faculty of, I mentioned the koyach hadibur. Yeah, you can use that one, but I don't want to confuse matters, so I use a different example. So you have the power to throw a stone. Koyach hazrike. The power of movement, taking your arm and throwing something. So when you throw it, it's called koyach goli. It's a revealed faculty that's being expressed. You're actually taking an object and you're throwing it. Even before you throw it, you have the koyach nelam, the ability to throw it. And it could just take a split second for you to decide, I'm going to pick up something and throw it. So that's called koyches nelamim versus koyches geluyim. But then there's a thing called koyches atzmim, which is not what he's talking yet here. Koyches atzmim would mean the very faculty that your soul has the capacity to do something. But then there's the koyach yuli benefesh, like he calls here, atzmi, that the nefesh just has that. I'm confusing matters by calling it koyches atzmi. Let's skip that level. Let's just go. The nefesh has the capacity to do things. It's not revealed in any way, but it has the power. The best proof of it is the fact that you can do it. If you're able to extend oyer that relates to another, That means you also have the capacity to that relates to yourself. And that's all coming from the very capacity of the soul to give off to the etzem, what he calls here, like the koyach ha-seichel ha-yuli atzmi. The koyach ha-seichel ha-yuli atzmi is not actual seichel. It means your soul has in it the capacity and the potential for seichel. But it's on a level of a yuli and a atzmi, meaning it's all within potential state. Then there's the koyach ha-seichel as it comes revealed to yourself. And then there's the seichel as it comes revealed relating to another. That's what he's saying here. The ima yeshe koyach ha-nefesh, lo atzmus ha-nefesh mamish, even though this level is not the core soul itself, it's still koyach ha-nefesh. And it's also not what the nefesh on its own carries everything that it can carry. We're talking about an actual koyach atzmi yuli. How you call it be'etzem hanefesh ve'ein b'chinas hamshacha v'gilim min ha'etzem klal. So it's encompassed in the core soul, and it's not in any form of extension, hamshacha, transmission, or revelation from the etzem at all. So let me explain it with the example of the sun. The sun, we know, gives off sunlight. And we see that all the time. When you see the sun rise in the morning and you see light reach this earth, the dawn breaks, that's sunlight. That's revealed light coming to this world. If you trace that back, you go back to the sun, we know that there has to be sunlight within the sun too, as he says in Sha'ar Yechid V'Amunah. But it's still not the etzem of the sun. It's the light that's coming out of the sun, Then there's the sun has the capacity to give off light. It's a luminary. It was created to give off light. Even if it's not giving light, it has the capacity to do so. That's what he's talking about here. Then there's another level. The sun itself was created in a way that it is, sounds like I just redundant, but it's not. The sun that's a luminary means neise. It carries that. That's what God created. The sun should be a luminary. Just like a tree has its personality, the sun has its personality. Then there's the next step where the sun has within it the capacity. It's already a koyach, but it's a koyach that has no gili. Then there's the koyach gili to yourself, and then there's the gili to another. That's essentially what he's saying here. So really, there's etzem, there's the koyach atzmi hiyuli atzmi. That's the ma'alim hamshacha v'gili. There's the hamshacha v'gili to yourself, and there's the hamshacha v'gili as it relates to another. That's essentially what he's saying here. And he's saying now like this: Yesh leimer, the benekudas Reshimu, that again the nekudas Reshimu nichlal is encompassed gam b'chinas madrega zu u'madrega zu. Also, this level of etzem ohr. So besides being helam atzmi, it has the etzem ohr, has the ohr that reveals to itself, and the ohr that reveals to another, all encompassed in a concealed koyach gvuli way in the seed or the nekuda, the point of the Reshimu. This is another yesh leimer here. So you see the Rebbe Rashab continuing to develop the Reshimu. I don't believe on page 1269, he's saying yesh leimer here. So I'm thinking, did he say that already there? Hold on. Okay, he's definitely saying a yesh leimer. Before I continue, any further questions? Because I want to go slowly here because this is a very intricate and detailed breakdown.
Yeah, this is בהמשך to what you said before. It sounds from here that there is something which is higher than oil golui le'atzmoi. Because he's saying
for sure. Yeah, etzema yeah.
And this
he
is
says
also,
clearly, the ma'alim b'chinas gili gam la'atzmei. Says it very clearly, yeah.
And this is also below the Helam Atzmi, right? Because it shaykhs to oil.
Yeah. This is like the concept of oil. Yeah. So he says like this. So yesh lema that the Nekudas Reshimu includes also this etzem oil. Hagam de b'madrega zu lo hoya tzimtzum. In this level, the tzimtzum did not have impact. There was no tzimtzum. Because the etzem oil remains completely beyond tzimtzum. Tzimtzum has an impact on the oir hagili la'atzmei and the oir hagili lazulas, on the two levels that we spoke about before. The tzimtzum had to have an impact there because you have to conceal that. The etzem oir never needed to be concealed because it was never revealed. But kol mokim, nevertheless, even though there was no tzimtzum in this etzem oir, nevertheless, this point of the Reshimu, being that it encompasses in it the infinite divine light before the Tzimtzum, so it's a chiddush, because you can say that etzem oir remains in the domain of lifnei tzimtzum. What does the Reshimu have to do with it? They say no, that the Reshimu is so deep that it even includes the etzem oir that was completely not even expressed in any given way before the tzimtzum. It's a tremendous chiddush, actually. But he's clearly saying that. And just to show you how the Rebbe Rashab is developing this, look at the next line. He's going to say, now v'yesh lahamtik hadover, and we can sweeten the deal. I mean, lahamtik hadover means literally sweeten, but he means to say it makes it a fuller, more flavorful understanding of this idea. It's expression in Torah, lahamtik hadover, when you're saying, okay, here's an idea, and now we'll like sweeten it or we'll enrich it with this explanation that he's going to say right now. So you see that he's now going to support his chiddush with the Zeir Arakia that he's quoted earlier.
Could I ask something else?
One second. Yeah, I'm going to stop for a second. Just a moment. I just want to say, okay. So there's clearly a chiddush here about etzem oir. I want to, there are a lot of implications in this chiddush. It's basically saying that through the Reshimu, we can access the highest levels of Gilui, even etzem oir before the tzimtzum. Like I said in my introduction the other day, at the end of the day, Chassidus, especially Chassidus Chabad Ayin Beis, wants the interface to be as complete as possible. So if we would have the Reshimu, would have the Koyach HaGvul and Helam Ha'atzmi, but only the Gilui of La'atzmei or Lazulas, but not etzem oir, in a way we would still be missing something. So now by saying this, he's saying that essentially, let me put it in the example of the artist. Then I'll stop for questions. This may be very helpful. Remember, when we go back to the artist, when we look at the art from the bottom up, you see the world around us. You see the world of mineral, vegetable, vegetation, animal, human beings, a beautiful world. This is all made up of the building blocks, the DNA of the 10 spheres. You retrace the steps from the art, you come to realize there's an artist that created this art. Then you came to realize that the artist has other types of art he could have created, infinite types. Then you come to realize that the artist is not defined by being an artist. So can you see all of this in the art? How far can you go? And what he's saying here is, because there's a Reshimu that is like a fossil that carries over and contains like a reminder. What did I use before? Like a flash that gives us a picture, an image of everything that was pre-Tzimtzum. So not only are you revealing within existence, obviously you need the kav and the creation for all of this, but not only does the art carry in it through the Reshimu, the intensity of the artist as he planned and envisioned existence, but also all the infinite possibilities. But that's still meir la'atzmei, as he radiates to himself, as he also, in other words, how the world is, how the art is seen by the artist through the eyes of the artist as he radiates, as he relates to himself, not to the art. but it also gives us but the etzem ha'oyer as it's within the artist that's beyond revelation altogether. Remember, the artist is already expressing himself through his art, but there's a part of him that's also there that is not expressed. And you could say that may be off limits. The Reshimu that it has also that within it is telling us, no, we also have the etzem ha'oyer. This is in addition to the helam ha'atzmi, that is the fundamental state of concealment of the letters that we're talking about. So essentially, the Reshimu becomes now this carrier of the whole picture before the Tzimtzum, except it's in a concealed way. That's why we can exist. It's coming through a Tzimtzum. It's concealed, but it's in it. It's like almost like a time capsule that you can't see everything in it, but when you start expanding it through the Kav, and the Kav creates existence, and then through our Avodah, we reveal the divine level by level as we retrace the steps. This time capsule or this capsule of the Reshimu begins to open up and reveal its secrets of pre-Tzimtzum reality, and will give us a picture of everything from all the levels of Ohr. Spashtus Ohr, the extension of Ohr as it relates to existence, the Ohr as it relates to himself, the Ohr that doesn't relate at all because it's not revealed yet, and the Helam Ha'atzmi, which is the root of the very structure and the very gvul of it all. That's the way I would just frame it all. It just makes it easier to understand what we're really learning here. It's quite awesome. What can I say? So now I'll be happy to take any questions.
Is it correct to say that this oil that you said, which is even higher than the oil hagolui le'atzmoi, he's calling it koyach ha'seichel ha'yuli ha'atzmi, he said that this is koyach ha'nefesh, loi atzmus ha'nefesh, v'loi masha ha'nefesh noisei be'atzmoi. That means that atzmus ha'nefesh and nefesh noisei be'atzmoi is even higher than this, correct?
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Because atzmus ha'nefesh in the Moshel Lamayla is atzmus mamish. That's b'chlal higher than Helam and Gili than everything. When you say atzmus, yechelis atzmus, you're saying it's like the nefesh nesekech. He can do anything, the Eibishter. But it's all the Maila from Helam and Gili altogether. Then comes the kav Helam atzmi and the kav of Gili, which is not even Gili, it's just the etzem ha'oyer, the etzem concept that God is revealing. That's how I would explain it. You see what I just said? So there's atzmus b'chlal l'mayla ma'hakel. There's atzmus neiseh hakel, like so to speak, yechelis atzmus. That yechelis itself will bring yecholte lahoyer, yecholte shaloi lahoyer, which would be shaloi lahoyer would be helam atzmi. Yecholte lahoyer would be etzem ha'oyer l'mayla megili la'atzmei. Then comes in that kav gili la'atzmei, then gili la'azulos, simsum l'shimu kav. And the actual process is implemented.
Is it making sense to say that the nefesh, that the Helam Atzmi is even higher than the Atzmus HaNefesh and the Nefesh Noisei?
No,
Atzmoi?
I don't think so. No. Because Helam Atzmi is already the Kav of Helam. So it can be lower than the Neisei Keches or Atzmus itself. It has to be lower than that. That's how I would explain it. Yeah.
Rabbi Jacobson, I have a question.
What's that? The Helam Atzmi, however, does reveal that Atzmus is Lamaila Migiluyim and higher than expression. That's correct. So Helam Atzmi does reveal to us things about Atzmus that even Etzem Oyer is not Megala. That we learned earlier, both in volume 2 and volume 3. That's correct.
So Atzmus HaNefesh is Giluyim, and that's why Helam Atzmi is maybe...
I wouldn't say Atzmus HaNefesh is Giluyim. Why would you say that?
I'm asking. No. Nefesh Neisei Keches is also not.
I mean, you're talking in Atzmus or in the Nefesh now? I mean...
In Atzmus, not in Nefesh.
No. Atzmus is Gamri higher than everything. Atzmus has Yechelis, that would be Nesa. Like I just explained it. Then comes the Kavim. Helam Ha'atzmi is just more powerful because it reveals that God is not defined by any definition and any manifestation. But remember, we want Giluyim also. We want Oyer. Oyer is not to be dismissed. You don't want just Helam Ha'atzmi. You want Helam Ha'atzmi to be revealed in a world of Giluyim, like we're learning. That's why Hamtokas Gvuras B'Shoshim. You want it to be revealed. You don't want it to remain concealed. If it remains concealed, then all we have is suffering. You want that the Helam to reveal the Koyecha. But we're going to learn all of this. He's going to explain it all more. Go ahead. You want to ask someone else? Wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I have a question. So back to the example of the artist, that when we have a defined art that you said, let's say the artist drew a sky and the water and everything else. There is one level in this that, yes, it's a sky, but also there's infinite possibilities of the color of the sky and how the artist draws it. How does that fit into these levels?
Well, listen, the 10 spheres, even though they are 10, but they're ultimately, each one of them has a blig vul, an infinite dimension to it. Because at the end of the day, they are God's attributes. They're divine attributes. So though chesed is not gvura, but there's an element of infinite chesed, that it can go in Atzilus. Ein sof lispashtus is the expression. It can extend the infinite. Our kindness has a limit. You can only do that much kindness in your life because we're limited human beings. God's kindness is ein sof. So that's how I would say that within the sky or within the structure of existence, there's also an element of a continuous flow. However, in our world of Asiya, it's both. The limit is not just that it's chesed and not gvura, it's also a limited flow of chesed. In Atzilus, chesed would be more unlimited. If you're talking about in the artist envisioning chesed, then for sure it's unlimited. But then there's higher layers of unlimited that's not even defined by chesed altogether. There's no art, there's no structured art. It's different types of art or beyond art, etc. That's how I would frame it.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's stop here. By the V'yesh Lahamtik, we'll stop by the Yesh Lahamtik. He's going to so-called sweeten it and make it more geschmack, more flavorful, more appealing. I don't know the right word. Api azera ki I see. And explaining this, but he's going to continue explaining. We'll tackle it. It may not be all clear right now, but I assure you we'll go over it again and again until we get as clear as we can. So I'm going to stop by the Yesh Lahamtik. Anyone wants to ask anything or any other comments? Okay, so we're stopping a little more than half the page on